Good evening, everyone. Hello, it's Gordon Causey coming to you live and unscripted with Candy the Wonder Pup, and I didn't get her treat. But I guess I'm going to have to get it. It's right now. It's the 21st of February. It's 9:45 p.m. I was going to do this video yesterday, but then I crashed out. I worked a 9-hour day, was tired, and crashed out early and didn't wake up. I see I have someone watching. The comment field or the chat, the live chat is on. So if you want to put up a comment, hey, Peter is asking me, what's the story with the channel name Nitno? Nitno. I don't know what you mean. I've got it now branded as Act One, a Canadian take on news events. But give me a second. Let me get Candy her treat. Otherwise, she will not leave me alone. So it's just 2 quick secs. Yes, my wonderful YouTube channel with such high production values. Lay down. Speak. Speak. Oh. And there we go. Candy is taken care of, and she's happy. Going to be talking about, I've said before that I have unacceptable masking, unacceptable views, and some of those unacceptable views are on masking. I've done a video about it before, but I thought I'd cover it again. But before I do, Canadians got some good news. A poll just came out today. The news just came out today about a poll that was just completed by Nanos Research, and the Trudeau Liberals are, the slide continues. They're down even more. They've slid so far. They're now in a statistical tie with Jagmeet Singh's NDP. I mean, it's the Titanic, the Liberal ship. And Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives have climbed. And political junkies like myself, I did take political science courses at university, but you don't have to be a political scientist to know that momentum in politics is everything. And but the cautionary tale is that we still have a year and a half to go. We're looking at September, October 2025 before an election absolutely has to be called in this country. There could be one before. There's speculation now that with the NDP rising, that Jagmeet Singh could withdraw his support and that he could throw his hat in on a vote of no confidence, which would topple the Liberal government. However, I don't know how likely that is. I've got to check the numbers, but I think if the Bloc Québécois were to either step in and support the Liberals, or maybe even abstaining, that would be enough to defeat a no confidence motion. I don't think the Conservatives and the NDP combined have enough seats just on their own to defeat the Liberals. I got to check the numbers. I'll do that next time. But I mean, I find it almost inconceivable that Trudeau could reverse course, that he could right the Liberal ship and see their polling numbers start to go up. I find that highly unlikely. Trudeau has done just too many stupid things over his tenure. And before his tenure, the blackface and lying about it, firing Jody Wilson-Raybould after she refused to bow to pressure from the Prime Minister's office to treat SNC-Lavalin with kid gloves. She wouldn't do it. She was going ahead with the prosecution, and so he had her removed as Canada's Attorney General, as our top lawyer, and then on top of that, then not only that, then I believe she was kicked out of caucus disgusting way to treat a highly accomplished, First Nations woman, but she wouldn't play ball. She wouldn't go along with the corruption in the Trudeau government. Accepting gifts and a trip from the Aga Khan, uh, breaking his promise regarding accountability, regarding transparency, regarding balancing budgets. I mean, Canadians are reasonable. Everyone makes mistakes. The only thing is Justin Trudeau is abusing the privilege. I mean, he's horrible. If Trudeau was a mechanic and you took your car into him to get the brakes fixed, he would just increase the volume on your horn. And that's how bad he is. I do have a joke. I do have a Trudeau joke. Trudeau, with all this news of his tumbling support, he's just getting hammered daily in the caucus session. He's got members of his own party who want him to resign, and he needed a break, so he decided to sneak out of town. And he had one of his staff rent him a car under an assumed name, and he put on a disguise and he just wanted to get away. And so he got into a rental car and he drove out of Ottawa, and he was tooling around on the back roads, and he was driving by a mental institution when all of a sudden, lo and behold, he gets a flat tire. And Trudeau's like, oh God, what else can go wrong? And he pulls out the instruction manual. He's never changed a tire in his life, but he's quite proud of himself. He manages to jack up the car. He gets the flat tire off, and he's got the lug nuts sitting sitting there in the hubcap, and he gets the new spare tire on. And he reaches to grab the hubcap that has the lug nuts in it, and he knocks it. He tips it over, and the lug nuts, tunk, 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 go rolling down into the sewer. And he's standing there over the sewer, and he's like, Phew! And there's a guy in the mental institution walking behind the big high fence. And the guy's looking at him, looking at Trudeau. He's going back and forth, and Trudeau sees this guy, and he's like, oh my God, now I got a lunatic looking at me. Oh God. And the guy behind the fence says, hey, buddy, I can help you out. Trudeau looks over and says, you're in a mental institution. How are you going to help me? The guy says, it's really simple. Just take one lug nut off of the 3 other tires and then thread them over every other bolt on your spare tire. That'll be enough to get you to a garage where you can get the lug nuts replaced. And Trudeau thinks, he goes, my God, that's a brilliant idea. He says, what are you doing in a mental institution? And the guy behind the fence goes, well, I may be crazy, but I'm not an idiot like you. So that's my big Trudeau joke for tonight. If you missed it, I see I have a couple of people watching now. You can replay it later. But my masking views, I've said before, I appreciate everyone liking my videos, subscribing. It's gone insane for this miserable channel. I'm up over 550 now. A couple of weeks back, I was at 160, 180, and things are, even 550 for a YouTube channel, that's nothing. I mean, Dr. John Campbell and others, these guys, 2, 3, 5, 10 million, 500. But it's still nice. So thank you. But as I warn everyone, I have, views that are considered by certain people to be unacceptable. Trudeau certainly would consider my views to be unacceptable. If you're a Trudeau supporter, there's another bit of news that just came out. Pierre Poilievre has just stated the common sense and obvious position that he does not believe that men should share locker rooms with girls. Um, and of course, Trudeau's woke left supporters, that the genuine fringe minority in this country who still support our moronic prime minister. They consider someone, a parent who doesn't want their parents who don't want their daughters sharing locker room, shower, change facilities with men. That's considered ultra right wing. It's just considered ultra common sense. And anyway, I mean, there's such a divide now between this woke left liberal mob and the rest of us, the majority of us. But the left wing woke mob has their hands all over the media. They want to normalize this kind of nonsense. That guy McIlvaney, whatever his name is, the guy in the Bud Light cans who likes to dress up like a teenage girl. And why is this happening? Why would a company like Budweiser, I forget who owns them, but doesn't matter. Why would they put this idiot onto their beer can? And pay him to destroy their brand. Why would they do that? There's a concerted effort, and it transcends politics, academia, and the corporate sector to push this agenda of gender fluidness in the West to basically crash Western society. And it's by design. And thankfully, the majority of the population, not the woke left mob who gets their marching orders from the television, realizes it. And Pierre Poilievre coming out and saying that, girls, women's changing, shower, facilities, locker room type places, they're for women. I don't even like saying for biological women, because a biological woman is a woman. It's redundant to say biological. And I don't go for the saying trans either, or rather cis. This is a new term. They say, you're a cisgendered male. And I'm like, no, I'm not a cisgendered male. I am a male. I did not choose my gender because gender is not a choice. You're born with it. There is a very rare condition referred to as intersex, where instead of XY or XX, the chromosomes get mixed up. It's a medical condition, and it needs to be dealt with often through surgery, through medical intervention. But it's that's an infinitesimally small percentage of the population are intersex. When we talk about this trans nonsense, it does not involve intersex. It involves men who want to pretend to be women or women who want to pretend to be men. That's all this trans stuff is. So there's an unacceptable view right there, at least according to the woke leftist radical nut bar mob, who thinks that a parent who doesn't want their daughter going into a locker room with a man, they think there's nothing wrong with that. Give me a break. But another one of my views that is unacceptable is I am anti-mask, unapologetically so. However, there is scientific rationale behind it. When mask mandates first started rolling out in, I think it was August, September of 2020, I had done a lot of reading. One of the most eye-opening articles I saw was in the CBC, and it was May of 2020, and it said, masks, not always the answer. If you want to Google it, that's the article title or subject line, masks, not always the answer. And they were quoting an infection control epidemiologist with the University of Toronto by the name of Dr. Colin Furness. And what Dr. Furness was saying was that a mask that you're wearing on your face all day long, that it's damp, it's warm, and it's an ideal breeding ground for all types of germs, bacteria, viruses, pathogens. I mean, it's a petri dish. And he cited a study that was published to the British Medical Journal in 2015, not ancient history, just 2015. And this article came out in 2020, so it was only 5 years old at the time. And this study showed it was an Australian team that had done it, and it was published to the peer-reviewed British Medical Journal, and they found that healthcare workers wearing cloth masks over, I think it was a 4-week study period, increased their risk of developing a respiratory infection by 1,300%, a 13-fold increased risk of developing a respiratory infection in the group, in the arm of the study that wore a cloth mask. Just to give this some scope, in the background, there is people get respiratory infections. They happen. That is the background rate. Well, the healthcare workers in this published study who were wearing a cloth mask for hours a day during I think it was a 4-week study period. I actually read the study, but I haven't read it for a while. Their risk of developing a respiratory infection was 13 times greater than the general population. Even the people who wore the medical masks, sometimes called procedural masks, the masks that you'll see doctors and dentists wear, doctors when they go into OR, or a dentist, even those masks had a 200%, double the increased risk of developing a respiratory infection. And again, within the article, in the CBC News article, Dr. Furness was saying, well, it makes logical sense because you think about it, you're breathing on this all day long, and it's an ideal breeding ground for germs, viruses, bacteria, gunk. I mean, garbage. And then he cited the article that was published to the British Medical Journal. I had already read the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in the United States. They have published material. I actually have it, a PDF file from the CDC, talking about non-pharmaceutical interventions in an effort to reduce disease, things like viruses. And they had done countless studies on masks to see if they had any impact on reducing the spread of viral pathogens, and there was none. They said that loose-fitting masks that doctors wear when they go into the operating room, the reason they wear those isn't to prevent viruses from spreading. The reason they wear those masks in an operating room is they're standing over a patient with an open, gaping wound, and they don't want spittle. When they say, scalpel, forceps, retraction, whatever, when they're talking with the nurses and other medical staff over the patient, gaping open wound, maybe their chest cavity is open, you don't want spittle going in. And the other reason is because if you've ever watched a medical TV show like St. Elsewhere or MASH or any show where they show an operating room, if it's somewhat realistic, there are bleeders and bodily fluids can spray out. And the medical staff, those standing over the operating table, they don't want that crap, those bodily fluids spraying them in the mouth. Quite often they will wear goggles for the exact same reason, because they don't want to get sprayed in the eyes by blood or other bodily fluids. That's why doctors wear masks inside of the operating room. And that's a favorite trope of the mask-loving people. They say, well, doctors wear them in an operating room. Yeah, so that they don't spit into an open wound, and so that they don't get blood sprayed in their mouth. They don't wear it to stop the spread of a viral pathogen like a SARS-CoV-2 or an influenza. So there's that aspect to it. However, now, of course, you see people walking around with these N95 types, the ones that look like coffee filters. And At this point, I'm willing to put a little bit of water in my anti-masking wine and say that if the mask is being worn properly and handled properly, okay, maybe there is some benefit, provided you follow the proper donning and doffing procedures. I did work in a medical unit in the Army, in a field ambulance unit, and so you get trained. Even I was a radio guy. I was in communications, so I wasn't a medic, but even still, you had to be trained in the proper donning and doffing procedures for medical grade PPE that has to be handled in a sterile fashion. Donning means putting on, doffing means taking off, and it's very meticulous. You never want skin on skin contact with outside material. Anytime there is contact between skin and outside material of any PPE, your hands have to immediately be washed. And then when you're done, even if you've done everything perfectly, you have to wash your hands, thoroughly and ensure or sanitize. And if you go to the World Health Organization's own website, and you'll see that they say that the mask, anytime a mask is put on, taken off, or anytime it is touched at all, anytime you touch the material, that your hands have to be washed, clean, sanitized immediately. And the reason for that is cross-contamination. When you touch the outside of the mask, it's a petri dish. It's wet and warm. It's a ideal breeding ground for a virus like SARS-CoV-2 and all kinds of other garbage. I mean, there's bacteria out there in the world now that's drug resistant. I mean, getting infected with drug resistant bacteria could be worse than, SARS-CoV-2. Obviously, you've got streptococcus type things out there that cause flesh-eating disease and what have you. But the thing is, the double-digit Mensa dropouts I see wearing these masks, 99% of the time, they're not engaging in the proper donning and doffing and handling procedures. I see people going into a store, and as they walk, as they are walking through the parking lot toward the front doors, they reach into a dirty pocket, pull the mask out, put it over their face, they glom all over it, they constantly touch the outside material. I see people going in, sitting down at a place like Tim Hortons, a coffee shop, having a coffee, and then they take the mask off and they just sit it on the table, a nice common touch area. And then they drink their coffee, like all of a sudden now, viral pathogens aren't going to come at you when you're drinking coffee and sit in the seated position. And then they put this gross thing that they've been breathing on for hours that's could be loaded with God knows what, and they put it onto a table. Then they get up. Did they sanitize the table when they leave? No, they're not thinking about other people. They're just scared and selfish, and they're only worried about themselves. And they don't care if they're spreading contaminants far wide. There are common touch surfaces all over the place, door handles, tables, keypads, touch pads for Interac payments. I mean, common gas pumps. They're countless. We live in a dirty world. I mean, there are germs, viruses, pathogens are everywhere. They are ubiquitous. There's a big word. Ubiquitous just means they're everywhere. And the thought that you can, and my favorite is when I see guys with a beard like me, or even bigger, wearing a mask, and it's like, what are you doing? I mean, when you're transporting sand, instead of a wheelbarrow, do you use a shopping cart? Because that's what you're doing with your mask with a full beard on. Like I say, I will allow that maybe they might have some benefit if it's an N95 tightly sealed to the face, handled properly, but no one handles them properly. So anyway, I won't go on any longer. Hope you liked the jokes. You're welcome to repeat them. I snuck a couple in at the beginning, a couple one-liners. Trudeau's done. There is every possibility. There's a lot of talk now. We're coming up to February 29th. 2024 is a leap year. And I just came across something, and it was in 1984 on February 29th when Justin's father stepped down. And that's when he announced it. It was right on or the day after February 29th when he took his famous supposed walk in the snow and decided to walk away from politics. I think Justin should channel his old man and realize that it's time to walk away. I've got Anna Markey. Hey, just got here. I live in Ontario and just claimed medical mask exemption. You mean in Cuba? I'm not sure I understand your question, Anna Markey. Anna Monarchy. Oh, there's a comedian. I wish I could remember his name, but he said he trashed all over Trudeau. This is what's so amazing about Trudeau is he's losing support everywhere. When he got elected in 2015, the youth were a big bloc supporting him, and I think it was primarily because of his promise to legalize marijuana, which is one of the maybe the only promise he actually kept, because he did legalize it. But anyway, this comedian was trashing all over Trudeau about his blackface and the turban and everything he's done. And he said his dad would be so upset. I mean, his dad would be so mad because Fidel Castro was all about, and the place broke up laughing. Sarah saying you can't be gone soon enough. He will be gone. A month is a lifetime in politics. So I'm not saying that something couldn't happen between now and the next election, but at this point, it's like the Titanic and the boat's already split in half. I mean, there's no rescuing the Liberals under Justin Trudeau right now. Could the Liberals resurrect themselves under a different leader? If Jody Wilson-Raybould, the Attorney General that he fired, came back and ran for the Liberals, I would give her a serious look, because I admire that woman. She stood up to Trudeau. Trudeau tried to bully her, and she didn't give in. She didn't cede any ground. PP for Poilievre, as things stand right now, it's a slam dunk. The previous two elections, 2019, 2021, I voted PPC. And I'm speaking as an individual who, and I hate to admit it, but it's the truth. In 2015, I was tired of Stephen Harper, and I did vote for Justin Trudeau. Please don't kill me. It was one vote, and I regretted it very soon thereafter. But I voted conservative in the past. I'm 57 now. Born in 1966. I'll be 58 this year. And, in my younger days, I actually at times was a card-carrying member of the NDP, of the Liberal, and the Conservative parties. So I'm the type of voter that it's voters like myself who are the reason we change governments in this country. There are certain individuals who vote conservative every election, provincially, federally. The conservatives are always right. And there are some who are the same way with the Liberals. It doesn't matter if a fire hydrant is running. If it's a Liberal fire hydrant, that's who they vote for. I'm one of those individuals who my vote will move around. And Liberal, NDP, Conservative, I've voted PPC the last two times because not Poilievre, but Scheer and Aaron O'Toole, just they didn't cut it for me. And I didn't like the way Scheer cozied up to the dairy lobby in Quebec. And why these difficult usernames? Anna Monarchy. I used to think Jack Layton seemed like the best PM candidate, though I barely paid attention to politics back then. That happened with a lot. I forget what election that was, but that was the election when the NDP became the official opposition to Harper's, I think it was a majority government, and they were the official opposition. And Layton, I didn't like Layton. I found him to be pompous. I didn't meet him. What happened was a friend of mine got me tickets to an event at, I think it might have been the Phoenix. It was a downtown concert venue in Toronto. And Jack Layton was announcing that he was running for the leadership of the NDP party. And the Bare Naked Ladies were supporters of Jack Layton when he was a Toronto city councillor. And so they were doing a free concert and then Jack Layton got up on stage and announced that he was running for the leadership of the NDP. And so Scott, my buddy, invited me, would you like to come down? I'm like, BNL, Bare Naked Ladies, if I had $1 million, sure. And I went down to watch the event, and Jack Layton then moved through the crowd and he was shaking everyone's hand. I shook his hand, and he was around a bunch of university-aged kids, and he was dressed, he was such a Beau Brummel, such a little Lord Fauntleroy, very nattily attired in his shirt and tie. And I said, you want to connect with these kids, take the jacket off and get rid of the tie and loosen up a bit. And I don't even think he heard me. I think he was just, basking in the moment. He liked being popular. One thing came out though where Jack Layton did really well was in the province of Quebec. He had grown up in Montreal and he actually spoke French pretty darn good. His French was not bad at all, and he, in that campaign when they took over as leader, as the official opposition, Layton hired some image consultants in Quebec, and they suggested to him to loosen up his French. His French was very educated. Quant à l'opinion de tout le monde, and very proper. And he would say, et vous, les Canadiens, la chose le plus importante pour vous, les Canadiens et les Québécois. And he was very, but then they told him, and he started to do it. He started to drop in là, which is like saying a, ben là. And he started saying vous autres, which is like yous guys. Hey, pour vous autres. And for yous guys, what I'm going to do. And Quebecers lapped it up, because they just called him Jacques, Jean-Jacques. And it became a bit of a cult of personality. And candidates running for the NDP in Quebec who didn't even campaign, who figured they had no chance, woke up in the morning, they're like, holy crap, I won? Because people were voting for Jack Layton. And I read through the last few of these. Let's see, Anna Monarchy. I used to think, okay, the pandemic woke me up, so to speak. The pandemic woke up a lot of people. Personally, I feel like 9/11 was a wake-up call for me when that psychological operation happened. And all the inconsistencies, all the unanswered questions. I haven't gone through them for a long time, but there were like 30 or more things that just didn't make sense, that didn't add up about that day. George W. Bush was sitting in Booker T Elementary School. He was talking about a reading program, and one of his senior advisors, Andy Card, came and whispered in his ear, and the newscaster said, "This is Andy Card telling President Bush that a second plane has just hit the Twin Towers in New York City." And the thing is, everyone in the world, if you wanted to know where George Bush was going to be on the morning of September 11th, 2001, it was on the whitehouse.gov website. Everyone in the world, if they wanted to know where George W. Bush was going to be, knew that he was going to be at Booker T Elementary in Florida on Monday, September 11th. And yet, now with the United States seemingly under attack from unknown forces who are so sophisticated that they've been able to bypass the world's intelligence, Western intelligence agencies, the NSA, the CIA in the United States. They've been able to circumvent the security at several airports. You know, we're talking about so is President Bush at risk? Obviously, they didn't think so, because if they thought he was at risk, they would have whisked him away from Booker T Elementary, where everyone in the world knew he was going to be. And they would have whisked him away to a safe and undisclosed location, but they just left him there. That was a question. I mean, there were tons of them when Building 7 went down perfectly. Never got hit by a it did not get hit by a plane. The Twin Towers were, but Building 7 wasn't. 45-story building that just, and they say it collapsed due to fire. When has a steel framed building anywhere ever been just collapsed in on itself? And it looked like a textbook example of when you see a controlled demolition, when they blow out the superstructure of a building so that it collapses in on itself, right on its own footprint. And a monarchy is saying, with respect to my telling Jack Layton to lose the coat and tie, it reminds of the Fight Club movie. I never saw that movie. Don't want to come off as too sophisticated, verbose, and ostentatious and redneck gangster. Can you stick in any more $50 words? Sophisticated, verbose, and ostentatious. I didn't even know anything about Building 7 until years after reading about it online. Turned into a pile of dust, yeah. And then the speed at which they cleaned it up. And then there was the fact that the plane that went down in Pennsylvania, and it just left charred remains. And they said there were no explosives on board. And we've all seen pictures of plane crashes before. You have a big section of tail here. You have a big section of wing over here. You can see the nose of the plane. Like, there's some wreckage. All that was in Pennsylvania was just big black charred hole in the ground. They say there was no explosives. And they interviewed FEMA workers, Federal Emergency Management Association, FEMA workers in the US, and the press was there interviewing them. They said, "What are you finding?" And someone said, "Oh, we're not finding anything bigger, nothing bigger than a phone book. A plane just completely gone." What? And then, of course, the Pentagon, the one that hit the Pentagon, and took out a section of the Pentagon that contained the records that might have shed some light on a missing countless billions of dollars that had just disappeared. Rather convenient. And there's no, the Pentagon, one of the most video surveilled buildings in the world, and there's no video of a plane hitting it. Just all you see is a flash and a boom. And countless more. The fact that Larry Silverstein, the leaseholder on the World Trade Center complex, had just taken out an insurance policy that included acts of terrorism, and then he was able to collect on it twice because his lawyers successfully argued that each plane hitting that constituted two separate terror attacks, and so he got to collect twice on the insurance. There was that. There was the fact that short interest, you have to know a bit about the stock market, but short interest on United Airlines, American Airlines, on the reinsurance companies, on a lot of companies, their stock prices after 9/11 plummeted, and the amount of short interest had shot up exponentially in the days about 2 weeks prior. It's like someone was placing a huge bet, a short. When you take out a short position on a stock, you are betting that the price is going to drop. And stocks always have a certain degree of short interest, prominent stocks like United or American Airlines or the reinsurance companies. But that amount of short interest, the amount of people betting that stock was going to go down, all of a sudden shot through the roof, and which suggested foreknowledge. I mean, there are literally 30. I'm just trying, these are just the ones that I'm remembering right now, with just off the top of my head, without having, looked at anything again. I mean, there were tons more. There was the fact that the Bergen County Record, which is a mainstream newspaper in Bergen County, New Jersey. It's a place I used to live. I used to live in a little town called Glen Rock in the 1970s when I was a kid. And the Bergen County Register printed a story about a moving company that had a van on the Hudson River, on the New Jersey side of the Hudson River, that was filming the events. And they had eyewitness accounts saying that the people filming the Twin Towers, that after the buildings collapsed, that they were high-fiving. And then it was later reported that they were Israeli nationals, and some suggested that there might have been involvement by Mossad, which is the CIA of Israel. The number of questions that came out of that day was hugely eye-opening. And then you remember the anthrax letters. A lot of this stuff got forgotten. I have something, I don't have a completely photographic memory, but it's pretty damn good. And the anthrax letters that came out as they were putting in the U.S. Patriot Act. And so there was this massive piece of legislation called the Patriot Act. And while it was being debated in the House of Representatives and the Senate and the U.S. Congress, congressmen started to receive letters that were laced with anthrax. And the letters said, praise be Allah. And they were definitely intended to look as though they came from Islamic extremists. That's the way the letters were printed, the envelopes. However, anthrax, it was later reported, it has a genetic signature, and they were able to trace the origins. And the anthrax that was being sent to the U.S. Congress, to congressmen and congresswomen, let's be politically correct, that one I consider fair. Anyway, the anthrax that was in the letters actually came from a U.S. Army base. I think it was Dr. Richard Sachs or something, going off memory. Yeah, and Monarchy is bringing out the fact that the planes that hit the Twin Towers, they blew up, disintegrated. You'd think that a piece of a wing or something was like the planes were made of paper mache or something. And yet somehow, we've got fire burning hot enough that a plane basically disappears, and a passport survived. Not only that, but a copy of the Quran. And then there's PNAC, Policy for the Next American Century, was a conservative think tank based, I'm not sure where they were based, maybe Washington, maybe New York City, but they were a conservative think tank, and their members included Richard Pearl, Paul Wolfowitz, Donald Rumsfeld, basically George W. Bush's inner circle. And around 1999, they published something of a white paper, and this white paper was talking about how the U.S. needed to go into countries like Iraq and Afghanistan, and they needed to effect regime change and to install governments in those countries that would be more friendly to Western interests and to Western corporate interests. and how this was an urgent need. However, in the paper, they said the only thing that would allow that to happen, that there would need to be a Pearl Harbor style attack on the United States. And lo and behold, September 11th comes along, and often was called a Pearl Harbor style attack. They got exactly what they needed. And then what happened afterwards? They went into Afghanistan exactly as this policy for the next American century, commonly known by the name PNAC. Exactly, they got exactly what they needed to do what they wanted to do, and there were more. I mean, there's countless stories. There was an instant messaging company called Odigo. Back 2001, you had AOL Instant Messenger, you had MSN Instant Messenger, Yahoo had an Instant Messenger. Instant Messenger technology was in its infancy, and there were a lot of different competing firms trying to bring out instant messaging technology, and one of them was called Odigo, Odigo, very simple name. They were an Israeli-based company, I think headquartered in Tel Aviv, and it's not unusual. Israel is something of the Silicon Valley of the Middle East. A lot of tech companies based there. And Odigo had offices in the World Trade Complex, and their employees on the morning of Monday, September 11th, 2001, text messages, instant messages were sent to Odigo employees telling them not to go into work that day. John Ashcroft, who was I think he was the Attorney General. I know he was a senior member of the Bush administration. Exactly what his title was, I'm not sure, but John Ashcroft, he stopped flying commercial a week or two before 9/11. Up until then, he'd been flying commercial, then he stopped. What I tend to think happened, I think my belief is that the U.S. intelligence apparatus knew it was coming and basically got out of the way and let it happen. And I think it's plausible that they may have even greased the skids and helped them along and, tried to leverage off of it. Why did Building 7 go down? I mean, to me, that looked like a totally planned demolition, which would mean someone would have to pore over the blueprints for that building, identify all the key structural supports within the building, and then place explosives there. And then when you blow out the superstructure and then the building collapses in on itself, they want to have it into its own footprint. And a monarchy is saying a while ago, I was reading about a theory that the Titanic was sunk intentionally to take out certain bankers. I've read the same thing. And at this point in the game, I don't discount anything. It's not to say I necessarily believe it. I haven't gone too far down that rabbit hole, but I do know that a major opponent to abolishing the gold standard was on the Titanic. And by, I think it might have been Chase of Chase Manhattan Bank, but I might have that wrong. But anyway, a number of bankers were supposed to be on, and then they left. They canceled their trip. But this one individual, very wealthy, very prominent, maybe it was J.P. Morgan, I don't know, I forget the names. But anyway, he stayed on, and he was a major proponent for the gold standard. And after the ship sank, the biggest promoter of keeping the gold standard. And if you're not familiar, the gold standard, what it means is that it used to be that currencies were backed up by hard tangible assets like silver and gold. And so they would be, when you write a check, it's a check is a promissory note based on the money you have in your account. When a country issues currency, that currency used to be based on the fact that, well, in a vault at Fort Knox or wherever, there's a gold, actual tangible physical gold and silver that back up that value. That was eliminated. We now have what are called fiat currencies. And what that means is that the money in your pocket, I'll pull out a US $1 bill, that is worth on the international markets whatever you think it's worth, whatever you believe it to be worth. It's notional. It's not hard. It's not a hard currency anymore. It's a fiat currency. I'm going to keep going with what Anna Monarchy is saying. I read about some anthrax letters being sent out. Wasn't aware of these details. You can read into it. I mean, I haven't read up on it in years. I was all over it in 2001 and 2002. Some people say they think it was holograms as in directed energy weapons. I've heard those arguments before as well with respect to 9/11. I don't know. I mean, I just find it, what I found incredible was the way the planes basically disintegrated into those towers. I found, and the fact that the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, and likewise the plane that crashed into the Pentagon, there was no debris. You'd expect to find something, the nose, part of the wing, part of the tail section, something. There was nothing. And then Anna Monarchy is saying that started ISIS and left Al-Qaeda with a cache of military tech. When you look at ISIS, Islamic State, Bashir al-Assad is the dictator of Syria. And what happened was, during the Obama administration, the Americans were proposing one natural gas pipeline, and the Russians were proposing a competitive pipeline. And Syria had to pick between an American pipeline or an Iranian pipeline for delivering natural gas. The Iranians, or rather the Russian pipeline, had their pipeline proposal had the pipeline going through Iran. Iran is an ally of Russia. The American proposed pipeline had the pipeline going through Turkey, which is a NATO country, an American ally. And so Assad had to choose the American pipeline or the Russian pipeline. Assad chose the Russian pipeline, the one that would go through Iran. And the Americans and the Obama administration didn't like that. And so what they did is they funded, armed, and they trained insurgent groups in Syria that were trying to topple the Assad regime. And within dictatorial countries, there are always resistant groups, but typically they often don't have the money, the arms, the training to be effective. Well, after Assad rejected the American pipeline in favor of the Russian one, the Obama administration, they went in, they funded, armed, and trained these insurgent groups to destabilize the Assad regime in hopes of toppling him so that a new dictator could be put in place, one who would choose the American pipeline instead of the Russian one. And so Assad had to dedicate his military and security forces into suppressing this rebellion. And while he did that, while his armed forces, security forces are all, looking over here at the insurgency, that allowed ISIS, Islamic State, to come in the back door and just created a nightmare situation. We all saw what happened with the Syrian refugees. And don't worry about the typos. I was able to figure that one out. Last comment regarding fiat currency, just an imaginary amount of money in a computer system. Yeah, I mean, basically, it's like a stock on the stock market. You think about the days of Nortel. Nortel went to, I think it got up around $140 a share. And this is a company that never made a single dime in profit. And yet, they lost money every single year. And the way they were able to stay in business is that when they needed money, they would simply print off shares and sell them into the market. And because people thought that, they looked at their phone and it had the word Nortel on it, and they saw a switch in their tech room at work and it had the name Nortel on it. So they thought, wow, this Nortel is going to be big. Fact of the matter is, they never made a single dime of profit. And they were able to stay in business simply by printing more and more and more shares. And then eventually, when the tech bubble collapsed, that's the reason is people started to go, okay, am I ever going to get a dividend? Well, a company that's losing money and is only surviving by selling shares into the public market, it's never going to pay a dividend. It's a Ponzi scheme. They just keep printing more shares. But so long as the market was willing to bid them up. And I know someone who had $500,000 or so in Nortel stock. And I said, why don't you sell? And they said, oh, I'll get creamed in taxes. I'll have to declare capital gains and the government will take half of away. Besides, the analysts are saying that it's going to $200 a share. So why would I sell for 140 when I'm going to get 200? He ended up selling at $5. Just before they went bankrupt. The stock market, I know a fair bit about it. I played it for a number of years. I'm still in it marginally. It's rigged. I've got no other way to say it. And, even knowing the games that are played, even being aware of the manipulations, it's still a very hard game to play, and I would caution anyone against it. Anyway, Anna Monarchy says that's the last comment they're going to make. I've gone on nearly an hour, but I'm not even sure I'm saying your name right. I mean, it's just a username, Anna Monarchy. I like it. Thank you for watching. Everyone who did show up and watch this, I can't believe it. If you made it this far and you want to give me a thumbs up, I already have 8. Thank you. And if you want to subscribe for more unacceptable views, you're welcome. Sarah says, thanks, good video. I don't know how good or bad it was. It was just me rambling on, but damn it, I enjoyed it. I just meant and Anna Monarchy is saying, I just meant the immaterial material, referring to that as the comment I elaborated on. Fair enough. Anyway, God bless everyone. Well, I'm going to start doing these now on Wednesdays and Mondays. Those are the 2 best days for me. So if you're in and around a computer or your device around 10 o'clock-ish on Wednesdays and on Sundays, that's when I'm going to do this. I really appreciate everyone who has subscribed. I can't believe I've gotten up to 500 and, 550, 560, something like that. It's unreal. And Lori Parker Stewart, seen you before. Thank you for coming on. And I'll see you on Sunday night. Talk to you later.